MDK is a 1997 third-person shooter, one of the first of its kind in fact, from Shiny Entertainment, known as the creators of Earthworm Jim. You play as Kurt Hectic, a dude in a skin-tight suit of armor known as the Coil Suit, and take out colossal alien invasion ships used to flatten the Earth. Think of the climax in Fully Coolly. There's a lot to be said about its production and technical aspects, but I won't be getting into that in the slightest because there's already a perfect video on that subject that you can watch instead. I'll just review it as a gaming experience in the year 2017 and hopefully convince you that it's still worth giving a shot even if you've never played it before and have no nostalgic memories of it. MDK is what many would refer to as a wacky game, but despite that, is devoid of cutscenes, narration, or voiced dialogue. There's no lengthy intro FMV, you get a brief text screen where Dr. Hawkins informs you of the landmark you'll be saving, a quick load screen, and you're in the game. Instead of being a video game but with jokes, MDK delivers its wackiness through non-stop super creative gameplay. The most novel aspect of the game back when it came out was the sniping mode. Kurt can detach his arm cannon and apply it to his helmet, which takes you to a first-person mode that allows you to zoom in and shoot a large variety of projectiles at the enemy. Normal bullets, homing explosives, airstrikes, you name it. This is hilariously introduced in level 1 where the suicidal aliens inexplicably help you with your aim instead of putting up any kind of fight. Not only is this segment funny, it's also mechanically ingenious. Unlike the sequel, where Dr. Hawkins talks to you and explains what you're supposed to be doing, the game respects you enough to let you figure out what you're supposed to do purely through its clever design. The rest of the core gameplay is quite straightforward, yet still feels very satisfying thanks to the audio-visual presentation and the inherent fun of its by now tried and true gameplay style. There are also some secrets to discover here and there, though generally it's definitely a linear game. Most of the time you just shoot enemies while jumping and strafing around to dodge their projectiles, occasionally jumping on some platforms for good measure. The sounds, alien voice samples and animations give everything a nice impact, and the enemies shoot out green polygonal blood in a way that just feels very right. As you go through stage 1, you'll start to notice MDK's strongest asset, its sheer variety. You'll begin with a free-falling sequence towards the alien ship, which is repeated at the start of every stage, and is ingeniously designed around a risk versus reward concept. When the green tracking laser catches you in its sight, the ship will fire a bunch of homing missiles. This would be very easy to deal with if not for the introduction of the third element, the parachute-bound power-ups. This way, you'll be trying your best to stock up on ammo, health, and weapons as much as you can while taking as little damage as possible. From stage 2 onwards, the free-falling moments will be mixed together with the bonus stages at the end of every level, where you fly through a tunnel towards a 150% health power-up while trying not to hit the electrified walls. Being good at these is optional, but it certainly helps make things easier, especially if you're playing on the hardest difficulty setting, which I did for the entirety of this video. You'll have to do the intro sequence every time you want the extra health and weapon power-ups because the checkpoint at the beginning of the level does not take them into account. Therefore, save scumming is not the answer. Actually, that's another thing I like about the game. There are no quick saves, so the difficulty can be a lot more well balanced than it would have otherwise been. As soon as you fall down, you'll reach your first health power-up, a living, screaming box desperately trying to run away from you. After taking out your first few enemies, you'll open a door using the world's smallest nuclear explosion. You'll go through a sniping range, take out a tank by luring it towards an explosive barrel if you're clever enough, trick enemies into shooting an inflatable version of yourself, take out some bomb-carrying kamikaze dudes, destroy some enemy dispensers, hijack an alien ship and use it to carpet bomb the entire area, enemies and buildings included, fight a mini-boss, chuck some explosives into some vents to take out more aliens, take control of a robot to stealthily go past a group of super strong foes, get your cover blown, take cover behind a wall, where you'll find and then throw the world's most interesting bomb, and then you'll top it all off by having a sniper battle with the stage boss, and this is just level 1. From here on out, the sheer variety might not blow your mind quite as much, but the rest of the game's 6 stages still offer a very steady stream of creative content that never feels like it's wasting your time. There's always something that'll take you by surprise, for example a winter-themed stage where you go snowboarding while shooting down foes, and there's also a little extra bit of zaniness that I won't spoil here. This stream of never-ending creativity comes from a very respectable design philosophy that the developer expanded upon in the comment he left on GOG.com. The game was originally supposed to have 8 levels, but given the development deadline, they had to choose between a short game with non-stop creativity and a longer yet not as consistently inventive and playful experience. This is sadly why many will complain about the game being too short. This is the kind of variety I'm more used to seeing in a Japanese arcade game than a Western 90s PC shooter, and I was definitely surprised. A flaw I personally took issue with that I've not seen others bring up was the mouse controls. You can't actually move your character much as you're adjusting the camera with the mouse, which is strange since doing the same thing with the keyboard works perfectly fine. Perhaps most people just stuck to the keyboard controls or even with a controller, but I found myself using the mouse anyway despite the flaws simply because it pandered to my modern gaming instincts far better. Sadly, this made 2 of the platforming segments kind of unbearable, and it's not the only thing that made them suck either. Your main character is a 2D sprite, so it's not actually very easy to figure out exactly where he's standing. I mean, just look at this. This is hell. Thankfully, as I said, only 2 of the platforming moments really pissed me off. The rest were fine and quite fun at times. Then you have the bombing segments. I'm pretty sure there's no way to completely avoid taking damage, and as a result, surviving these moments depends far more on your performance during the earlier parts of the level. And as much as I love this game, this is absolutely a case of bad design. Lastly, there's some of the offensive items which are conceptually amusing but can be a pain in gameplay terms. God, why is Max's airstrike taking so long? Nonetheless, sniping mode offers a nice, stealthier alternative that allows you to call the groups of enemies from a distance. And then there are other items that are just kind of confusing as to what context they'll be useful in. The hammer is just kind of interesting as a thing that you can do, but is not actually that helpful. Now don't get me wrong, most of the items are perfectly fine and fun to use and self-explanatory like the twister or the hand grenade, but this aspect is definitely one that was not as carefully worked as the rest. Replayability is a mixed bag. When you complete a level, you're graded on total kills, basic gun accuracy, sniper accuracy, and headshots. What's more, each level is timed, and the geographic area you're supposed to be saving is wiped off the face of the earth if you take too long. All of this could have made for a great scoring system or even multiple endings, but sadly none of these grades really add up to anything. There's still fun to be had in replaying the game purely for the sake of getting better and better at it and feeling more badass as a result, but the lack of an ultimate reward for all of this definitely stings. Especially since I found the ending sequence to be, okay. I'm sure a lot of people will disagree here, but it was just a little too LOL random for my taste. But enough of the negatives. Visually, MDK is one of the many examples of creative artists doing great things within a set of limitations. Technically, the game's not very impressive. It was designed to run on even weaker computers at the time, so polygon counts and other feats of graphical fidelity are low even for 1997. Still, the game does some impressive things with its limited assets, being largely driven by its art direction. Levels and areas are memorable on account of their color schemes, which can evoke outright contrasting emotions. The first stage has a gritty war theme with a lot of different shades of brown. Meanwhile, level 2 has a far more idealized, pretty and shiny sci-fi look, best represented by these sequences that make a stylish use of reflective surfaces, and this on-rails segment at the end. It's just a static 2D background with some very light use of polygonal objects, but that just makes its ability to evoke such a sense of wonder more impressive. The fog covering up the bottom of the scene is obviously just a shortcut, but it just adds to the ethereal feeling. The tunnel at the end is neat in the same way as a certain free-falling moment later on, in that it considers not just how the level will look in screenshots, but also as the player traverses it. MDK looks very pleasant, inventive and varied in the same way that the gameplay does. It manages to be consistently interesting yet cohesive, unless an out-of-place moment is being used to evoke comedy in a way that I once again won't spoil here. There are various small details that add to an impressive whole, like enemies sometimes limping about after they've taken damage or a boss's face getting mangled as you're sniping at it. You can even dismember these ranged arm cannon wielding enemies, and if you take off their cannon arm, their attack pattern will change drastically. They will instead rush towards you and try to take you out with a melee attack. I didn't absolutely fall in love with the Tommy Tallarico soundtrack to the extent that other people did, but I certainly enjoyed it. It's definitely very fitting and gives many scenes an outright epic feeling. It's just the kind of thing that's more likely to mesh into the overall atmosphere instead of standing out through its melodies. Overall, despite the flaws, the game is a fantastic experience, absolutely worth playing in any age of gaming. It also manages to handle its sheer variety amazingly well in a way that's also surprising and very cohesive in terms of mechanics. Something like Earthworm Jim 2 can at times feel like a strange little mini-game collection. There's not much of a core. Sometimes I just found myself thinking, oh man, can I just stop being a blind salamander or stop doing puppy love just so I can jump around and shoot stuff. But here, I never felt like I was being kept away from the action, even when I was doing something quite different from just going around jumping and shooting at enemies. It's a game that mixes silliness and coolness very well, and even if it's very comedic, you still feel awesome playing it. So if you're interested, just get an old copy or maybe just get it off GOG.com. It's definitely worth experiencing.